Welcome to the Ask Sensei Tony podcast, where Sensei will address your questions about life from a cosmic perspective. Please subscribe and ask a question at AskSenseiTony.com to find out more about studying with Sensei privately, becoming a part of our spiritual community, and training to become a mindful minister of oneness in our seminary. We hope you enjoy this episode and find it helpful.
Hello everyone, I'm Sensei Tony, and today's talk comes from a question offered by Roger. And Roger says, "Dear Sensei Tony, I've recently lost someone that I loved very much, and it's been over a year now, and people are saying that I need to move on. What are your thoughts?" Roger, the first thing I want to say is my condolences for your loss. I've talked about this subject many times, and you'll find, I think, there's a letter in my book that I respond to, my book, The Three Principles of Oneness, How to Embody the Cosmic Perspective and Liberate Your Life, in the section where it's a lot of these types of questions that I've gotten over the decades. I do address that, so I would refer to that book. I think that when someone dies, when we love someone or someone we know dies, and people are trying to be comforting to us, what they're really dealing with is their own stuff, not really our stuff. And so it's very hard for people, I think, unless they have some kind of mindful process, to be able to understand how to negotiate these things and do this. In our 4-direction system of mindfulness, we teach people how to do these things. And I think the first thing to recognize is that. So when a person, tries to offer you some consolation beyond condolences or I'm sorry for your loss, what they're trying to do is deal with their own discomfort and their own pain and maybe suffering around a situation like that where they don't want to deal with it. And so a way of kind of not dealing with it is to try to get you to stop sharing it. And so it becomes kind of a way for them to help themselves, even though ostensibly they're saying something that's supposed to be helpful to you. And it's not helpful when people say those things to us, even if it's true, even if there's a measure of truth in it. In other words, what they're saying is legitimate. Like, maybe I am frozen in my grief, and maybe I need to have some way of working through that I don't currently have. Moving on, I would not suggest as a great way to accomplish that. And the first thing I want to do is kind of give you more of a philosophical context, and then I'm going to give you specific practices and some other recommendations. In the teachings of the oneness of all life, I often say in oneness there is no separation, and not even death can separate us from love and from oneness. And so when someone we love dies, and I've had that experience on several occasions, most notably my beloved sister and my father, and a couple close friends, a couple friends that I knew weren't like best friends, but people that I had kind of served in my pastoral capacity, so I became very close to them through that. That's another subject altogether, about boundaries and so forth. I do talk about that in another podcast video. I think sometimes boundaries betray us and don't allow our humanness. But anyhow, that aside, I have been through it, and when you go through it, you realize that the pain that you're experiencing is about that situation. However, the suffering you're experiencing often is is kind of connected to other experiences in your life where you've suffered. And so one of the things that I realized that I had suffered just as badly from other things that tormented me psychologically. And that was helpful to me because it helped me realize that the suffering I'm experiencing around this is not so much about the pain, but it was more around the blots and beliefs that I had attached to that experience. So I think that's an important distinguishment to make when you're in that situation, and that was something that just came to me in my own meditation, contemplation during the loss of my loved ones. And but on a very deep level, I don't think that the presence or the impact of that person's life ever really leaves you. And so you're not, no matter what you believe about life beyond this experience, that person who shaped you and helped form you and will continue to shape and form you and continue to shape and form the other relationships that you have, that person is always with you. I remember saying to my son, my father died. He was down in Florida, and we flew down that night, and I had to see his body and take care of some of that stuff. I remember my son and I, and we were staying at a hotel that we had all stayed together at before on the beach, and it was late, and there was no one around, and my son and I were out sitting in the back of this little pub that's right off the beach. That's part of the hotel. And I remember saying, that, kind of words that I found at the time very comforting to me. I hope they were comforting to him. But I said, he has died, and now he lives within me. And so that expression, he has died, but now he lives within me, is one that I have continued to use for every person that I've experienced that from. My beloved Buddhist teachers have all three died. Three of them have died. One main teacher, fortunately, is still with us and sharing his wisdom. But I did lose three. Al Bloom, Bernie Glassman, and my Aunt Kay Shaw, who was my first Buddhist teacher. They have died, but they live in me now. And they live in everyone who touched their lives, but they really do live in me. And I take that very deeply and sincerely. And I think it's important when that happens that you realize that you can continue to learn from them. In other words, and this might sound crazy to some people, but I still will talk to them and let the wisdom of their life and their teachings reach me. Because sometimes I had this one experience where I was talking to one of my teachers who had died, and something occurred to me that they had said that I had forgotten. And so, in a really powerful way, they're still there with me. And we have this practice that we developed, that I developed whenever I was a chaplain working in a hospital setting, and working with, at that time, working with a lot of dying folks at that time. And it was a way for the loved ones to communicate with the person who had died, using a specific meditation practice and a specific inquiry method. And I'm not going to go into that whole process here, but if you're interested in that process, you can learn that from me personally, one-on-one in sessions, and you can go on the website, AskSenseiTony.com, and set up a session, and I can teach that to you directly. It's very intimate, and that's why I don't want to go into too much detail here about it, other than it comes from the perspective that that person's presence, that person is still within us and lives within us. And so we can still communicate with them. And whether, again, like I say, someone believes that their consciousness is greater than just this experience, that the story goes on, or they don't, it works either way. And it's a very powerful way of healing. And I use it all the time myself. And meditation makes it easier to do. So, like I said, we can I can help you with that if you'd like. So what do you say? What do you do with that? So first of all, I want to address your question and I would say that it's really important for you to be in some sort of process where people that you respect and love and trust can give you the kind of caring that you need and the kind of insight that you need. And I think that's the most important thing I can say that. And then I would also say that don't necessarily listen to anyone that tells you that there's a very strict sense of how people should grieve, because I don't buy into that. I think that everybody has their own way. And certainly the insights of someone like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who studied death and dying and came up with the idea that we go, first we're in denial, then there's anger, then there's depression, then there's acceptance. And I'm not saying that there isn't validity to that. I just think that sometimes now people feel like they have to fit into that. And I think that's unfortunate because everybody grieves in their own way. And the amount of time it takes for a person to get through something, sure, there are some statistical studies that show that there's certain time frames where, in an ordinary circumstance, a person would be able to continue to grow and sort of have new experiences that would essentially be integrating what happened. And that's what I think. I think we can learn to integrate what happened, but you never get over it. And telling someone to get over it or, to move on is just so wrong on so many levels and so useless and not helpful. And from the four direction system of mindfulness approach, when you understand that if you're trying to help someone, you have to start with compassion. So the voice of the true self always leads with compassion, because compassion is going to allow us to let down our defense mechanisms. It's going to allow those walls to come down. And if we don't lead with compassion, then there's no way that the person's going to receive what we have to share, even if it is correct, even if it is true, because they'll just hear it as a critical voice, that somehow they're not doing something they should be doing. It's a judgmental voice. And so by leading with compassion, we can learn to gently disarm ourselves or someone that we care about, so that by making that grounding in compassion, that we can then, when they're ready and when we can see they're ready, we can start to offer some wisdom. And one of the things I say is that, just keep doing the compassion practice with them, and you'll know when they're ready to hear things. Many times they'll ask you. And in my own experience as a minister, ordained minister for the past, how many decades, I have found that when you are very compassionate with people and you're just a presence, it's that what I call that poetry of presence, they will usually ask you for your thoughts. They'll get to that point, but you have to be patient. And I think a part of being gracious is patience. And so that's my heart's advice on that. There is, I'm sure many of you know what a TED Talk is, and I belong to the TED Talk. You can sign up for it, and in fact, I'm planning on giving a TED Talk later this year. But there was a fabulous talk that I saw not long ago that actually made me think about this particular subject. When I saw this person's question, I thought, oh, that's synchronicity there. And her name is Nora McIlnerney. I don't want to get that wrong, but it's Nora, Mclnerny. And she says, we don't move on from grief, we move forward with it. And it's April 9th of 2019. So I would check that out on TED Talk. It's a beautiful talk. And she has she went through some terrible suffering herself and loss. And it's such a powerful witness and testimony. So I would highly recommend that. But just remember that, when you're going through that process yourself, or someone else you care about is doing that, don't say things to them that are really just trying to relieve your own pain, or put them into your own construct, theologically or what have you. It's just not helpful. and it comes across as judgmental in one way or another. So when you feel like you want to say to someone, well, I think you need to move on, or I think you need to get over, well, before you ever say anything like that, and I would recommend taking those phrases out of your vocabulary, I would really look at what you're dealing with and what you're trying to avoid by using those phrases. And usually we're fearful for the persons we care about, and we don't want them to be feeling the way they're feeling anymore. And I understand that, and that's valid. But there's a better way to go about it. So, hope that was helpful. Blessings.
You've been listening to Ask Sensei Tony. Please visit our website at AskSenseiTony.com, check out Sensei's books and videos, and become a part of the Dragonfly spiritual lifestyle.